Some exchange betting companies run short-lived promotions, like months-long offers of low commission. At BetDAG, we wanted to change the way we did things, so we set our commission at 2% permanently. That's 2% on football, horse racing, golf, almost any sport. 2%. That's just one way that BetDAG is changing for the better. For the better, like you. BetDAG, the 2% commission exchange.
Over 18s only, please gamble responsibly. Hello everyone and welcome back to the ROKER Rapport. My name's Alex and I am over the moon to once again be announcing a Sunderland win on this podcast. Yesterday the battleships of Wearside sunk the invaders from Devon as the lads dispatched Plymouth Argyle by 2-0, and joining me to revel in this victory is a motley crew of Johnny Goldsmith. How you doing, Johnny?
All right, Alex.
Did you get to the game yesterday?
I did, yes. That was great.
Fantastic.
Obviously, as you know, we did speak to one of the players who scored yesterday.
You did indeed,
I feel like, you know, what we need to do is we need to interview all the players.
I think so,
I think interview Charlie Wyke and he'll score a hat-trick next week. That's how it's going to be.
Interview him 3 times and he'll do that.
Yes.
The Johnny Goldsmith effect. Yeah, and as well as Johnny, we are also joined by former Sunderland midfielder Kieron Brady and also by the young ROKER reporter and aspiring journalist, Master Finlay Anderson. So we'll start with you, Kieron. How you doing?
I'm very well, thank you. In regards to the game yesterday, very encouraging performance that fully merited a 2-goal victory. I think you could say that was applicable to the first half alone. Plymouth looked very intimidated, one of the very few sides that have looked as if the occasion got to them at the Stadium of Light, but that is not Sunderland's problem. They took care of business, and although it seemed quite tentative given they only scored the second goal late on, it was a thoroughly convincing performance. The
first half, I thought, in particular, was one of the best I've seen all season.
Mm-hmm. It was excellent. Yeah, and we've also, as I say, we're also joined by Finlay. How are you doing, Finlay?
I'm doing good, thanks.
Good stuff. Did you get the game as well yesterday?
Yeah, I did. I was really impressed with the performance. Like, the 3 points was deserved just on the first half because we're just attacking, and that's all what we deserve.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. So, as I said, Sunderland beat Plymouth 2-0, a result that consolidates Sunderland's third place spot in the League One table, with the teams around them also picking up 3 points. Jack Ross made just one change to the side, which beat Bristol Rovers, as Lewis Morgan came in for Duncan Watmore. His side got off to an excellent start, with a dominant first-half display being rewarded with a goal from none other than Lee Cattermole, who gets his second ever goal at the Sol just 12 days after his first. The second half was perhaps not quite as impressive as the lads' first, but they saw the game out nonetheless, thanks to a goal from captain George Honeyman, who, as Johnny said, he managed to interview, and obviously, you know, there's no such thing as correlation implying causation, but, you know, you can't really argue with that, can you? That, all in all, rounded off another professional and comprehensive performance. So before we get into the nitty-gritty of the finer details, we asked the people on Twitter to summarise in 3 words their thoughts on yesterday's game. So Adam James Kane said, "Can't stop us." Mark McLaughlin says, "Sweet Luke 09. Macaminio, good name, said, "McGeady ruins defenders." Aidan Blitz Moores says, "The Cattermole show." John Watson says, "Getting there, lads." Paul Fletcher says, "Intentional Watmore assist." Paul Walton says, "Lee Barry Cattermole." Billy SCFC 2012 says, "Tune out, aye." Craig says, "Lee Cattermole testimonial." And Graham Field says, "Nice and professional." So, to start things off, I think, judging by that 3-word review, Lee Cattermole seems to be a common theme. He was outstanding again yesterday. So what did you make of his impact, Johnny?
Very good. That finish was incredible for a guy who's never scored, you know, that many goals until this season, where he's decided, actually, I can score goals now. I wouldn't say he was man of the match personally, but I mean, he certainly is a solid midfielder. I think he just done his job the right way.
He did indeed.
Yeah.
What do you reckon, Kieron?
Yeah, I know there was some concerns amongst the broad support whether Cattermole and Grant Leadbitter could play along together. Some people felt that there was far too many similarities.
Yeah.
But they have been able to do it, and they've been able to utilise the experience they have. And let's not forget that both have played at a much higher level for large parts of their career. And if Jack Ross can make sure that that happens consistently, then it's very difficult to think of any central midfield pairings throughout League One that would be better. So, you know, you're hoping that they can use their experience now between now and the end of the season, and hopefully it'll lead them to win a lot more games than they have perhaps since the turn of the year, where of course draws have become such a prominent feature. But the signs are good at the moment.
They certainly are. I think we said this as well last week, but a lot of people, myself included, and as you say, Kieron, weren't really expecting the Catamol Leadbitter sort of duo to really work. They're both holding midfielders that are very defensively oriented, so a lot of us just assumed that just wouldn't work. It would be one or the other. Many people thinking Leadbitter will be the starter and Catamol will maybe be the second choice, given the fact that his quote unquote legs have gone. It's a funny one, really, but I thought in yesterday's game that while they were both holding midfielders, they both had a lot of attributes that were different and complemented each other well.
Certainly, and I think it would be useful to try and make sure you get the best out of that partnership between now and the end of the season, because, of course, if promotion is secured, they're going to come up against a much higher standard of partnership and player next season. They themselves, as individuals, are going to be another year older, and I think what has been very telling is that when people tend to judge players, they do tend to omit certain aspects of what they can bring. And what Grant Leadbitter has certainly brought is a brilliant consistency from set pieces. And although Sunderland haven't scored from every delivery, they've certainly looked much more threatening than they had been throughout the opening half of the season. And it might not always be spectacular, it might not always be as easy on the eye, but if Sunderland, through Baldwin, Flanagan, Dunn, etc., are scoring from Grant Leadbitter's deliveries, then it all counts towards the same end. So there's certainly that difference between Catamol and Leadbitter, and hopefully it will continue for the next 10 games or so.
Yeah, I think Leadbitter's deliveries, as you say, have been a vital addition to the squad. It's made all the difference in the world. I think only about a month ago we were sort of ironically jeering when we got a corner because we just sort of thought, oh, well, it's a corner, it may as well be a goal kick, we're never going to score it. But we've just looked so much more dangerous from them now, and I think that is, in my opinion, 50% down to Leadbitter. I think his deliveries are great, but also there's also the Jimmy Dunn getting into the box now. He looks like a real threat. He almost scored again yesterday. Yeah. What do you think so far, Finlay? Do you think it's Leadbitter solely who's making the difference?
Yeah, I think the set pieces that Leadbitter's produced, especially yesterday as well, I saw in the box the people that were had in the box, the tall players like Jimmy Dunn that you've mentioned, Tom Flanagan, just the movement around the box, which Jack Russell I know has worked on in the training ground. It's just working for them now. Yeah,
I'd say so. I mean, we have obviously big centre-backs already. We wouldn't be doing as well as we did if our centre-backs weren't big players. But Jimmy Dunn especially is head and shoulders above the rest. I think Baldwin and Flanagan, while they are lanky fellas, Dunn is bigger and he's a lot more burly, and I think that plays a big part.
Well, the most important thing with regards to a set-piece delivery from a wide area is desire. It doesn't matter if somebody's 5'4" or 6'9". If somebody wants it and wants it more than the defending team, then there's a very good chance they'll go on the end of it. Doesn't always mean that they'll score, but you only have to go back to England's preparedness in the World Cup in Russia last year to realise how beneficial set pieces can be. England were extremely fortuitous that in Kieran Trippier they had somebody that can deliver outstanding, consistent deliveries. And when you know where a ball's coming, you can then, of course, work around that. And England capitalised on it to great effect. And Grant Leadbitter, I wouldn't say is necessarily as good as Trippier, but is certainly providing the ammunition for people then to hopefully show how much they want it.
Yeah. So would you say then, Kieron, that while good deliveries are good deliveries, it's that sheer sort of desire to score above all else that counts ultimately?
Absolutely. It's a huge factor. There's a reason why people at times who are 5'10" can quote unquote out jump somebody that's 6'2", and it's not because they're bigger, they're stronger, it's because their desire is much more prevalent at that time.
And I'll tell you who was a great example of that yesterday, Luke O'Nien. There was one point where he'd got forward and he won the ball off, I think it was either one of the centre-backs or the full-backs, and whoever it was a big lad, but he just leapt like a salmon in the box, and he just, and as you say, he just totally outleaped him. And I think if there's ever a player to exemplify sheer desire to win a ball, it's Luke O'Nien, because...
Absolutely.
Yeah. And then that brings me on to something else, really. I mean, on the whole, yesterday was a very solid performance. As I said, the first half was blatantly dominant, and the second was perhaps a bit more subdued. But overall, it was a very comprehensive 2-0 where we just showed that we were the better team, and Plymouth, I think, were quite clearly second best. But while we've spoke there about Cattermole and Leadbitter, who else who played well yesterday for you? Johnny, what do you think?
Aidan played well. I think last couple of weeks...
Well, that doesn't normally happen, does it?
No. Well, I think the last couple of weeks he's been a lot more consistent, and I've always felt he's a frustrating player to watch because he's got talent and then he doesn't show it very often. I think the last few games he's been a much more improved player for me. I think it feels like, I don't know, maybe he's realised, oh, hang on a second, we might not go up. I've got to really put a shift in here. And he has done. I used to say I'm not a big fan of McGeady because I didn't used to really enjoy the sort of inconsistency in his play, but, he's proved me wrong. I'm happy that I'll admit, he's done a good job. So I'd say McGeady was definitely one of the better players yesterday. Yeah,
I think he put their full-back under a lot of pressure again, as he so often does with League One full-backs. With a player of McGeady's standard, you have to consider, that he's played at a much, much higher standard than League One. I mean, there were a few players in this team who have, obviously, Oviedo, Cattermole, Leadbitter, but with McGeady, it really does just show. When he's on form, they really just can't handle them. What do you make of McGeady, Finlay?
I've saw him in the last few games, and I thought, Johnny said, he's been another class. He's been one of our best players I've seen so far this season. And his deliveries, we've just been talking about Leadbitter. From normal play, his deliveries have been outstanding. We saw that for the second goal when Watmore took it down, and just in the first half as well, it was well unlucky not to score on a few occasions, and then when he had a shot himself, it was a good save from their keeper. Yeah,
it was. That was the one from just outside the box, wasn't it? When Grigg took it down, and then rather than turning with bodies behind him, he
probably should have turned. I think.
Well, I think I think, to be honest, if he had turned, he would have hit a wall with those. I mean, I'm no natural striker myself, so perhaps if you're in the zone there, I couldn't hit a barn door and five-a-side, But I think maybe perhaps when you're in that exact moment as a striker, you've got the instinct to think, right, I can either play it out to McGeady or turn myself. And I think, we've seen Grigg turn plays before, seamlessly, so maybe he thought then it's perhaps best to lay it off to McGeady, who's running into space with momentum that he can put onto the ball. But regardless, the point stands, Finlay, that he was very unlucky not to score. And whenever he is on the ball, whether it's, approaching a shot on the edge of the box or twisting his way past their fullback, you do just think that his balls are going to be clinical. It's either going to be on target or it could easily be in. He's always got that in his locker, and I think there's teams in this division who are probably just absolutely terrified of playing him at any given moment. Is there anyone that you guys think also had a good game?
George had a good game.
Yeah.
There were a couple of occasions, the majority of the game, I think he played very well. Most of the players played well. I think Morgan didn't have the best games in terms of his delivery, although he did get in good positions. So he's getting in the right place. He just isn't doing what he needs with the ball.
That was something that I would agree with regards to Lewis Morgan. He seems to be very comfortable at gathering pace, progressing 20 or 30 yards up the field, but if he does not improve his end product, then he's not going to ascend up to being a good player, to a top class player, or even beyond that, because ultimately for somebody that plays on the wing, irrespective of how much showboating you do, irrespective of how many times you can beat a fullback, if that's not wedded with a final delivery and cross that is hopefully going to have somebody on the end of it, then in many ways it's futile. And sometimes it can be a little bit misleading in how you assess a winger. If they're cutting in and taking shots that just go by the post, sometimes it can lead people to think that they're actually a good player or a very good player. And one of the criticisms that's been levelled at Aidan for a significant part of his career is that his final ball has been poor, or at times he takes one touch too many. And the one thing that strikes me with regards to Aidan, certainly since the turn of the year, he looks to be enjoying his football. And when you have someone with that ability who is enjoying their game, then it becomes very easy for Jack Ross, because ultimately the instructions he gives to somebody like Aidan McGeady is just go out and play. Because if we give you that license, if we give you that freedom to express yourself, then it's us that are going to benefit from it.
Yeah.
And I think the statistics are there to reinforce that since the turn of the year.
Yeah, I think McGeady's probably the archetypal free player, isn't he? He's one of those who I think, as you say, you can just say to him, right, just go out there and do your thing.
I think he should be given as much license as possible. And one of the reasons for it is because for the large part of his career, his crossing has been very, very inconsistent. It's okay to point to the odd goal that comes from a cross, But when you consider percentages, then it becomes evident that for a large part of his career, there hasn't been enough converted goals. There hasn't been enough goals from him. But certainly since the turn of the year, I think is it 6 goals and 4 assists, or vice versa?
I think it's 6 goals and 4 assists.
That's exceptional. You know,
it is.
And when you're looking at somebody that plays as a winger or off the forward, you have to factor in assists, because it's completely unfair to expect them to have a 1 and 2 ratio of goals. You have to factor in the assists. So I'm sure Jack Ross will be delighted.
Yeah, a wing is naturally never going to be in the position where they should be accountable for that many goals. But when they're playing in the way they do, you should judge assists by the same merit as you judge goals, because the contributions is still vital.
You can then dissect the assists to see if it's coming from somebody's sublime individual qualities rather than just a simple pass that a lot of people could make. But one of the things, if you go back to the goal against Accrington Stanley, which was exceptionally well set up by Chris Maguire, Aidan showed great desire to get the ball from Chris Maguire, who showed great awareness to cut it across to him. And those are the little things that tell you that somebody is enjoying their football.
Yeah.
Conversely, when I was at the game against Wimbledon, I watched Chris Maguire warming up as a substitute early in the second half. And in that warm-up alone, I could see why Jack Ross has omitted him in recent times, because he was displaying all the signs and symptoms of somebody who is perhaps benefited from the superstardom that's been afforded him by the Sunderland supporters.
Right.
And then, of course, when he managed to go on in the Accrington Stanley game, we saw the best of him. So, again, it's a significant responsibility on a management and coaching staff to try to make sure that they can get consistency out of the players that do have that ability to change a game very quickly or to be the match winner.
Yeah, I think that's very well said. And on the subject of wingers, I think I'd like to talk a little bit more, should I say, about Lewis Morgan, who I think, while his deliveries were a bit hot and cold, I mean, certainly he can beat his man, as you say, but if you can't get that delivery, it can be a bit futile. The deliveries weren't consistent. There was some that had some real venom to them, and some that were just way wide of the mark. There was one in the first half that he just hit into the stands. But that being said, I think he does work a lot better as a starting winger, with maybe that sheer pace of Watmore making him an ideal impact sub. It seems like Jack Ross was thinking along those lines. You know, Morgan played the first, I think, 65 minutes of the game, and then perhaps as the game was wearing on at that point, he brought on Watmore, who again has been brought up many times for having an infamously poor end product, but with the sheer energy he's got, even if you're up against, it doesn't matter, you know, how bad your end product can be at times. If you're running against fatigued League One standard fullbacks, you're going to get past them shooting and get something from it at some point. So what do you think, Finlay? Do you think that approach is one that's working?
Yeah, because we saw for the Sunderland's first goal that Morgan won the ball back. That desire to win the ball back is what we need. Like, I know you said these crosses were inconsistent, but when he has got the ball, we know he can produce a good cross in the area, like we saw for the goal, and then Cattermole scored. But then when Watmore came on, we saw, because I think Plymouth defenders were becoming a bit tired coming on at the end of the match, so Watmore coming on was good, because like his pace is like what we need at the moment, like getting at the League One defenders, then get like Grigg coming in to boost his confidence, and like the other wingers at the back post.
Yeah, I think so. I think with the standard of these fullbacks, as I say, if you can just run at them, then you can just get what you need from the game. And I think when you have an axis of, say, Watmore and Grigg, who has a very good all-round play, and another winger who's got enough energy left in the tank nearby, if you keep that up as the game gets on, you are eventually going to get something. Even in the second half, where we weren't dominant, I think we still were able to keep enough pressure on them. And I think it goes without saying as well, but Plymouth's pressing was absolutely poor. Plymouth's response to our pressing, should I say, was absolutely poor. I think when we've played a lot of teams this season who have set up to frustrate and have done that very well. There's a lot of teams we've played where they've sat back and they've been able to hold us off and maintain us quite well, and then try and get us on the break. But Plymouth just really couldn't do it. I don't know what you guys think, but every time we seem to go forward, they just seem to break it.
One of the most obvious signs of the disorganisation within the ranks of the Plymouth side, certainly in the first half, was the gap between their midfielders and the centre forward. And quite often when it was going up towards him, although his hold-up play wasn't that great, even on the occasions there was very little support. So Plymouth weren't even getting any opportunity to build up some momentum to take them forward. And then, of course, what that means is Sunderland managed to get the ball back. They can play it then out to James or out to the right-hand side and then build another attack. And, of course, if that becomes a pattern of play, then it becomes almost inevitable that a goal is going to come at some point. And Sunderland were well worth the lead at half-time. It should have been more. And I suppose there would have been some fans a little bit apprehensive as the game was unfolding that could this be a game where they've dominated as much as they have, but we only have to go back to Oxford away and Scunthorpe away to see that late equalisers have happened of late. But fortunately in this occasion, the late goal actually came from Sunderland themselves. So very convincing performance.
Yeah, it was good to see us be able to see off a game. As you say, we've had games where we've played teams that, on paper they won't be brilliant, but if we don't do enough to put it to bed, then they're going to get something out of it, because there's always the potential there. I think we've said before that it doesn't matter how well you can defend against opposition, no one's immune from a screamer. I remember when we played Scunthorpe, I think it was, and it was Adam Hamill equalised in the 87th minute with just like a lovely effort from outside the box, and that can just happen.
Yeah,
those can just come about.
That almost happened, I think, with Plymouth. I'm sure there was a shot from where I was sitting. It looked like one of the players just took a shot from distance and nearly scored, and it just missed the post. I thought the keeper got a touch to it. Apparently, he didn't. It just went wide, and that was that was a big relief, because I thought I was going to score an absolute worldie. And I think in some ways Plymouth are probably a little bit unlucky in the sense of like we were 1-0 up, should have been more. They had a chance that they should have scored. They'd hit the side net. Like the goal, he wasn't getting a touch to it. That should have gone in.
Was he not? Was this not the one? Was this the lad with like the top knot who took the shot? I don't know his name. I forget it. But
Plymouth also had a penalty claim that I've not seen on television, so I don't know if there was any substance to it.
I haven't seen it yet, but I mean, from an instinct reaction, I thought we got away with it, to be honest.
Yeah, I couldn't really see from where I'm sat properly. Did you see it, Finlay?
Yeah, at first it looked like it hit the arm, but watching it back many times, it looks like it just hits off the chest. But I think the referee was in the ideal position to judge that call, so it was his decision in the end. And despite the Plymouth protest, I think Sunderland might have just got away with one.
There's no VAR in League One.
There's not, thankfully not. But I think what is a little bit worrying, though, is even if, as you say, Finlay does hit the chest and narrowly misses the arm, League One so far, as far as we're aware, is a division of dubious refereeing. If you can have balls be given for corners or not be given for throw-ins when they go outside the touchline narrowly, then I think it's reasonable to assume that you could get a penalty like that given against you, and that can suddenly turn the tide of the game. Yeah,
there was one moment, I think, where for me it looked like the ball went out for a corner and then he gave a goal kick. It's like, well, what? Yeah. Looked like it went off 4-9, then hit a player. And then we were expecting a corner, and he's like, no, goal kick. It's like, wow, what? Yeah,
there was a spell of about 10 minutes where the linesman had an absolute shocker. Like, everything just seemed to just not go out, even when it blatantly was. But no. Anyway, speaking of pressing, I'll bring us just back to that. The absence of Chris Maguire, probably our best presser in that team, is something a lot of us were gutted about. And as I've said, one of the best aspects of his game is that ability to just put the opposition under so much pressure while also making the notion of running around the defenders with the ball not looking pointless. We don't have many players who can drop into the hole, move around and hassle a backline in the same way that he can. But we did an immense job putting Plymouth under pressure yesterday. Can we possibly get by without him if we keep playing like we did yesterday?
If we play the way we did yesterday, yes. I think the first half shown that even without him, we've done a very good job at pressing. Yeah. Obviously, we didn't get enough more than we got one goal, but I mean, we've shown that we can. It's just keeping it up.
I think if I was him, I'd probably be sat on the sidelines or wherever, watching that Plymouth defence just quiver every time someone got within 3 yards of them. He's probably just sat there just thinking, if I was on that pitch now, like I could have an absolute field day against this lot. Don't know what you guys think.
Well, he was, but let's not forget that prior to coming on as a sub against Accrington, and of course the 18 minutes that he took part against Gillingham, he had ample time to sit on the sidelines. And I think a more important question is why Jack Ross felt it was most suitable for him to be sitting on the sidelines. In fact, if memory serves me right, he only got a place on the bench in the Wimbledon game because somebody got injured immediately before kick-off. So his ability isn't in question, but I think sometimes when you say that about a player, it can actually lead you to believe that he's a lot better than, you know, what he is. And of course, we can't disregard the fact that, you know, this is someone that has been affectionately entitled the King, who has never played at the highest level in the English League and has only played a limited number of games in the Championship. And of course, I think people then can deduce from that there must be something in addition to the fact that he does seem to have this physical ability, but perhaps there isn't that positive mentality to go along with it.
Yeah.
I wouldn't have any concerns about him being out for the remainder of the season. I've went on record saying that I believe Sunderland have by far the strongest squad in strength and depth in League One. It's not something I would boast about. I would expect Sunderland to have it, but nevertheless, if you were to offer me now the opportunity between now and the end of the season of Barnsley, Portsmouth and Luton having 4 of the leading players injured between now and the end of the season, but also Sunderland having it, I would probably be inclined to accept it because I think Sunderland would be able to cope a lot better than those other sides could. But I still think Sunderland without Maguire are, you know, a genuine force at this level.
Yeah, I think I personally am willing to concede that because Maguire got injured after what was for him one of his good spells, I'm probably viewing the whole situation in rose-tinted glasses for him.
Well, I mean, you see, people are saying a good spell. It was 25 minutes against Accrington Stanley and 18 minutes against Gillingham. You know, it's less than a half of football. This was not a brilliant return to form, despite what people would say. And of course, I believe that you are perhaps, like many others, looking at it through rose-tinted Maguire favourable glasses. But I think there should be an element of affection for him because of what he'd done in the opening stages of the season, and it's completely understandable. He is the type of player that entertains, but he was also producing a significant effectiveness in that period. But obviously something has been felt by Jack Ross to be unsuitable, inappropriate, call it what you will. And of course he was gradually reintroduced. So it's very disappointing for him individually, but I don't think it'll have any meaningful effect on the team.
No, I don't think so. I think, as you say, Kieron, the sheer squad depth of Sunderland, expected, you know, as we should expect, is better than the teams in this division in terms of quality and quality and the quantity of the quality and quantity of the quality. You know, I think we're head and shoulders above, and as you say, that's how it should be. If we're in a position where we can spend $4 million on one striker when we're in League One, a division where I think the record signing was $1.2 million prior to this, or something, you know, very, very meagre compared to what is in the Championship and the Premier League. If we can do that, then we should have the squad we have, and we should be able to do this. I think if not, then it would look very, very strange, really, to be in the position we are. And I think, as we've proven so far, we do have the squad depth to do what we're doing. We've lost players like Josh Maguire, we've lost players like Chris Maguire, who, you know, has had a lot of impact. He has had some very promising parts of the season, you know, despite some ones that maybe weren't as great in comparison. But Josh Maguire is probably the most crucial. You know, your top scorer is gone. I think for many other teams, that could be a damning blow. We're seeing with Portsmouth, the loss of key players has clearly affected them. Their form's dropped. But we're still knocking the goals in. If anything, we're knocking more goals in. Yeah, Josh Maguire was in and around the whole sort of 1-0, 1-1 saga. But here we are now, beating Gillingham 4-2, beating Rovers and Plymouth 2-0 apiece. Clearly, we're not struggling. What do you make, Finlay? How important do you think our squad depth is?
I think it's very important, although the fact we've seen that we can play with the number of injuries that we've had, like the start of the season and like the middle of the season, just going into Christmas period, we've had numbers of players out and we've managed to get through that, picking up points, like went on that winning run and that unbeaten run through October and November, where we had a few players out, and then we've just lost Josh Maguire, and now everyone's chipping in with the goals. Like, we've got Tom Flanagan scoring, like Baldwin scoring against Blackpool and Dunn scoring against Oxford. So I think it's going to be crucial for everyone to play the part if we're going to get promotion.
Yeah, Yeah, and I dare say we've perhaps compensated for the loss of Maguire by perhaps finding new ways to score goals. As we said earlier, the introduction of Grant Leadbitter has given us a much better outlet from corners, and the people like Jimmy Dunn and Flanagan and Baldwin are thriving from that. We're knocking in so many more from set pieces now, thanks to our lanky defenders. And obviously we've still got players at the club who have the capacity to get a goal a game if they have if they have the opportunity, the likes of Aidan McGeady. So I think it's all really coming on quite well. And as you say as well, Finlay, we've lost a lot of players as the season's gone on to injury for significant spells. Players like Brian Oviedo, George Honeyman, etc., Tom Flanagan, they would walk into many teams in this division. But we've managed to cope with them not being in the team, and we've got on with it. And I mean, I don't know about you guys, but if the worst games you're going to have are 1-1 draws away to Oxford with only 2 losses all season, then you're really in quite a good position. But anyway, I think now what I'll do is there's so many positives that we can bring from these games. But if I had to play devil's advocate and look for negatives from yesterday's game, then I personally would, first of all, run the risk of sounding quite ridiculous by saying this because, okay, we've kept 2 clean sheets, but I dare say the defence still doesn't look as convincing as it could. Yeah,
I do feel, as I said earlier, I feel like we are fairly lucky that we didn't concede in the game. As I said, that shot that I mentioned, nobody was near it, and the fact it just hit the side netting, we're very lucky it wasn't a more talented striker, I guess.
Was he not offside as well? Was there not?
I don't know if he was at that one. If he was, then that's all right then. But the whole penalty thing, but clearly, I think we are shown that we're not very tight at the back still.
Yeah,
I think we're just very fortunate that the Plymouth attackers aren't very good.
I think if you look back over the course of the season, you would at least find a percentage of the supporters who would offer the view that John McLaughlin has been the player of the season. And that alone at least prompts the question as to how the defenders in front of him have been performing, because I don't think there's any doubt that he's managed to secure some points for the club this season. Collectively, I would have great concerns about that group of defenders playing in the Championship. I think there would have to be significant surgery. There would have to be some relatively good expenditure in the summer months to ensure that you have that solid defensive base. Because although there's been clean sheets and although there's been a number of games where they've only conceded 1, there have been a number of games where other sides have created very, very good openings and chances. And thankfully, John McLaughlin has been on hand to save it, or of course, they may have missed them. So it's certainly something that needs addressing. And certainly if they get promoted, but I don't think
absolutely
would be under any illusions.
No.
So like a game like, for instance, against Plymouth, that's one thing, but against a team like Barnsley, I'm not too sure if we can handle that at the moment.
I mean, they might be missing Kiefer Moore, but they've only just gone and beat Southend away 3-0 with 10 men.
Yeah.
This is a good team.
Yeah. And they scored all 3 goals with 10 men.
Yeah, they did.
So it obviously shows that they're of quality.
It wasn't the case that they went maybe 2-0 up and then were comfortable and then got a man sent off. They had a man sent off almost from the get-go. It was only, I think it was about 20-30 minutes on the clock. And then from there, I think a lot of teams especially wouldn't go on to win, but crikey, they were still dominant. They were head and shoulders above Southend. I watched the whole game. They were best at everything. So I think obviously we'll get onto this a bit later. But when we, this is a good team, and when you're in the Championship, you'll be playing against teams equal to or better than the standard of Barnsley. And if you have those centre backs at the club and they're showing some of the nervy signs that they're showing now, then I think you could be in for a few problems.
Without a doubt.
Yeah. When we played Accrington Stanley, once they started getting forward and once the crowd started to turn, Sky cameras on them and all that, I think they looked quite nervous. I think it could be perhaps that they're quite young, but they just look very uncertain, Baldwin and Dunn at the time. And if you... It seems to be, for me, when there's a lot of pressure on them, when teams are coming at them more relentlessly. Gillingham were the same. Gillingham got 2 goals. Even though we did ultimately go on to win, they still got 2 goals, as did Stanley. It's teams that, when they come at us, look very dominant, that they seem to be quite concerned. And when you get promoted, if you get promoted, touch wood, you'll be playing a lot more games where you want on top all game. Because, you're the newly promoted team. So if you've got teams like Aston Villa, Derby, Nottingham Forest, Ipswich. Well, actually, no, Ipswich are pretty crap this season. It won't be them.
You won't be playing them.
No. You probably won't. Yeah. No. Bad example. But insert whoever's 7th in the Championship next season when they're running at you with all the usual boys. Your Cameron Jeromes and whatnot. Don't know if he's still going. Yeah. But when you've got players like that coming at you, you're going to be under a lot of pressure.
Some exchange betting companies run short-lived promotions, like months-long offers of low commission. At BetDAG, we wanted to change the way we did things, so we set our commission at 2% permanently. That's 2% on football, horse racing, golf, almost any sport. 2%. That's just one way that BetDAG is changing for the better. For the better, like you. BetDAG, the 2% commission exchange.
Over 18s only, please gamble responsibly. What do you think, Finlay? What do you make of our defensive situation at this moment in time?
We saw the inconsistency with the defence in recent games. Like, Jack Ross has been changing it from, we saw in the Blackpool game, he played Baldwin and done, the Checker Trade Trophy games. He's changed the defence, which I can get there, but, it's not helping with, the inconsistency of the defence. So, we've kept with Flanagan and Dunham. We've saw the impact with 2 clean sheets now. And I think he will stick with Flanagan and Dunn because I think Baldwin's injured at the moment. I think he's got a little knock.
I think Ross actually said I think it was the post-match presser, I think he said it was selection choices entirely that kept Baldwin out.
I think he's had a lot in the recent games, but it's still the inconsistency with defenders. Mm-hmm. If we want to be in automatic promotion places, we need to have a consistent defence. Is known throughout the league to keep clean sheets, and we're starting that with Flanagan and Dunn, which I've mentioned, the 2 clean sheets against Bristol Rovers and Plymouth.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I couldn't agree more, Finlay. I think what you've touched on there is a very valid point, that if your issue at the back is uncertainty, if you were to keep changing a back 2 that were already uncertain to begin with, you're really just fighting fire with petrol. In my opinion, anyway. I think if Baldwin and if Dunn and whoever he's playing with, if they have difficulty communicating, if they look uncertain, if Dunn, especially a very young lad, is looking quite unsteady alongside whoever he's playing with, if you then swap the young lad he's with another fairly young lad, I don't really know what you're getting from that. I mean, your only real veteran centre-back on the books now is Glenn Lewins, and goodness knows where he is. But yeah, I think it's an issue that we'll need to address, especially when we go up. But regardless, we'll have to sort it out. We'll have to perform some surgery, as you say, Kieron, in some shape or form, because you've got some crucial crunch games coming up. You've got Barnsley away, Portsmouth at home. You need 3 points from those if you want to go up, because all we're doing right now by winning is keeping the pace, which is worrying. Barnsley and Luton are very good sides, and I'm just thankful for now that we've already played Luton twice, really, because...
Well, that of course is encouraging, but I think having looked through Luton's remaining fixtures, they would be very confident that they will take a significant points return from the games that are still to be played. Barnsley against Sunderland on Tuesday week, of course, is a huge game. It could go a huge way to determining who gets that second automatic spot.
Oh, yeah.
If, of course, Luton manage to secure first. Mm-hmm. And it's a test of character. It's not just a test of character for the Sunderland side, it's a test of character for both teams, albeit the games at Oakwell. But it's all to play for. And, it's one of the great things for the fans this season is that they've been able to attend a lot of matches. They're enjoying coming to watch a team that's winning games, even, of course, recognising the fact that it's not at the highest standard. But, of course, you're hoping that that's set against a backdrop of a club that is changing its ethos, because it's absolutely essential for it to do it, because
absolutely
I still am unconvinced that they are. They're obviously winning a lot of matches, but I think when you get a new injection of personnel, and we've had that from the boardroom to the dugout to playing personnel, then there is a honeymoon period that comes from it, and that of course is compounded by the fact that you're playing against teams that aren't of a particularly high standard. So the acid test for me with regards to Stuart, Charlie, and perhaps the financial benefits that may come from Juan Sartori will be very, very tested this summer and possibly in the January window.
Couldn't agree more. So I think what we'll do now is we'll move on from the Plymouth game, and we'll look ahead to Tuesday's semi-final clash away again to Bristol Rovers. So we win that game, and obviously we're going to Wembley. It's not the biggest tournament in the world. especially not the biggest one we've been to at Wembley in recent times, but it's a cup final nonetheless, and I would love for us to be there. In fact, my dad actually is preemptively, again, big touch wood moment, is preemptively booked us a hotel at Wembley. So obviously, yeah, I know. So there's a man who's followed Sunderland for about 45 years now, and hasn't clearly foreseen the possibility that we'll do a typical Sunderland, regardless of who's in charge, and we'll lose 3-1. Because, that's the club we support. That's what they do.
Last time we went to Wembley, I didn't get the chance to go. So I'm really hoping that they do it so I can actually get there this time.
Oh, yeah. Well, on that topic, we took to Twitter to see what the Mackham faithful make of the possible moral dilemma that Jack Ross will have when he picks his team for these last 2 games. So in our quick question feature, we basically ask on Twitter a question relevant to what's happening at the moment with Sunderland, and we will take some of the more interesting answers from people just in the comments, and then we'll talk about them here. So what I want to talk about for today is the case of Robin Reuter and Alim Öztürk in relation to the Checkatrade finals. Well, the Checkatrade semi-final and final. So they aren't our first choices in goal and at centre-back. I think that's pretty abundantly clear. But they've got us this far in the EFL trophy. So we asked the people on Twitter, do they deserve to retain their spots for the semi and hopefully for the final? So we'll start with the yes camp first. We'll see what the people are saying. So Richie Martin says yes, neither of them have put a foot wrong throughout the whole competition. Andrew Tonge says yes, neither has done anything wrong. It sends the wrong message to the players if they're dropped, in his opinion, and they could still have a big part to play in the run if we have injuries. And there's also a man called D-Love Enthusiast, which is my favourite name of the bunch that we've picked out today. And he says, yes, Öztürk has improved massively since the opening day in the Cup games, and our defence hasn't been perfect in the last few weeks, so he plays, I reckon. As for Reuter, it's a tough choice, but I feel like he could do a job there, joined the club at a bad time, and is underrated. So what do we think in general of Reuter and Öztürk?
Well, I've not been particularly impressed with either.
No.
I know that Reuter's opportunities this season have been restricted, not least because of the performances of John McLaughlin. I had seen Öztürk in a number of games performing for Hearts in recent years, and I wasn't that impressed with him. I do take the point that he may have shown up a lot better in the Checkatrade games. But I think with regards to picking the team to play in Bristol on Tuesday night, particularly with reference to the goalkeeping dilemma, if you go back to the game against Bristol Rovers 8 days ago and you examine the attempts at goal that Bristol Rovers had, you might find then that John McLaughlin was only asked to save 3 attempts on goal or 5 attempts, whatever it was. Now, if you come to the conclusion that Robin Reuter would have saved all 3 of those or all 5 of those, then I think you would have much greater confidence in actually selecting him. Of course, he's not going to face the same shots, but at least you would have the confidence that, well, if this is the best that Bristol Rovers can offer, I believe that our goalkeeper would save them, our second choice goalkeeper. And that allied with the fact that he has been the Checkatrade goalkeeper, for the most part, or, for all of the matches then, Jack Ross might feel obliged. A lot of it is to do with what Jack Ross may have said to people like Alim Öztürk and Robin Reuter at the beginning of the campaign. If he had said then, look, I can give you an assurance that you will feature in every game until such time as we are either knocked out of this tournament or we appear at Wembley, then you would like to think that he would be true to his word. Because if he's not true to his word, and he does pick John McLaughlin, and he does go with 2 of the centre-backs that perform week in, week out in the league, it can have negative implications for the rest of the squad, not just the players that are directly affected. So if he said to those players, you will be first choice in the Checkatrade trophy, then you would like to think that that will continue.
Yes, and that would definitely be the case. I think that the knock-on effect would go far beyond. I mean, obviously, this is all hypothetical. We don't know for certain that Jack Ross has made such a promise to Reuter and Öztürk. We don't know that, but he easily could. I know it's a possibility, and let's say it was, and as we say as well, hypothetically, he then drops Reuter and Öztürk for, let's say, Baldwin and McLaughlin.
You can still lose.
Oh, absolutely, but the point there is that not only does it show that he's willing to break a promise Well, no, but that's it, really. Not only does it hurt their morale, but it shows that he would be willing to break a promise. So I'd like to think that if such a hypothetical promise was made, that he would stand by it. But that's just what it is. Another thing as well I found interesting about D-Love Enthusiast's answer is that our defence hasn't been perfect the past few weeks, was it the direct quote in his comment. Do you think that could be a factor as well? Could that be something as well of a win-win, maybe? If our defence hasn't been brilliant, is it worth playing Öztürk regardless? Is it, if nothing else, just a chance to maybe try out someone else alongside Dunn or whatever?
Possibly. I mean, I think, we've had 2 wins on the bounce, and maybe we didn't expect to get this far in this tournament.
No.
Maybe thinking, well, we're nearly at Wembley, and I don't know, do you want to stick with the team that's been winning in the league? Because we've already beat Bristol Rovers twice this season. We've already beat them down their place last week with the team that we're using in the league. Is it worth going back with that team?
Yeah.
It's a difficult one to answer because it would offend, possibly it could offend Öztürk if he doesn't get picked when he's been picked all this time. But we're on a winning streak at the moment,
I tell you, it would be a lot better to drop either of them or both of them for this game than let them take part, be in a successful Sunderland side that negotiates a path beyond the semi-final, and then get dropped for Wembley.
Yeah.
But I would like to think that if Jack Ross has given them a shoe, I don't know if it's just those 2 players or indeed others, but they will be.
Those are the main 2. If I'm not mistaken, Reuter and Öztürk have played in every Checker Trade game so far. There are other fringe players like Maguire, who obviously are featuring in that trophy and haven't featured as much in the league, but those are the 2 primary fringe players. I think Maguire's very unlucky to be out the squad, but Reuter and Öztürk are comfortable sideline players with the other players ahead of them.
This isn't the first time that we're discussing a dilemma of this particular nature, because a lot of Premier League clubs, albeit they don't take part in the Checker Trade Trophy, when they play in the League Cup or even the FA Cup, decisions are taken prior to the commencement of those tournaments that a goalkeeper, for example, will play in those tournaments until such time as they're knocked out. So, and did Jack Ross not make, I wouldn't call it disparaging remarks about the Checker Trade Trophy at the beginning of the season, but did he not more or less suggest that it's perhaps a distraction that he could do without?
Yeah.
But of course, that changes entirely when you're one game away from Wembley and all that entails. And they've maybe been a little bit fortuitous with the draw at times, but what Sunderland have done is, they've managed to negotiate a path beyond each round, and they're now 1 game away. And as you said, Alex, a trip to Wembley will see a mass exodus from Sunderland and surrounding areas, irrespective, because if the fans get the chance to see the team bringing even what might be regarded as an inferior glory, they will be there, and they will be there in huge numbers.
Yeah, I think that's just it. I think a cup final is a cup final. And I've got every faith in our fans that they will sell out our allocation in Wembley. I don't know about Port.
I said before that if professional football ever became interplanetary, you would find that the number 1 search on Google between Southwick and Shiny Row was, how do I get to Neptune? Because I know that the Sunderland supporters would go there in not only in huge numbers, but they would find every last piece of disposable income they have at their disposal. In fact, they would find the indisposable income in order to go and follow their side, because their devotion to their club is immeasurable.
You're not even wrong in any sense of the word there. If we had an away game on a gas giant, we'd find a way to see it out.
Yeah,
that's just the way Sunderland fans do it. Honestly, travelling fans, the travelling fans we have are you will struggle massively to find a better contingent.
They're second to none.
Absolutely. So we've got a couple more here from the yes camp that take a slightly different tack on the ones we've already discussed. So Dave Pick, he says yes. They have performed at a good level to get us this far and should retain their position. League is a massive focus, and players like McLaughlin and Dunn/Flanagan can ill afford any injuries. And Colin Burden also says yes. saying that they have done well in the rest of the games they have played in. Also, getting promotion is our priority, so we need to try and keep the same squad for the league games. So is this perhaps a win-win that they're hinting at? Is it perhaps good on one hand to reward Ozturk and Reuter for their efforts while also saving your players like McLaughlin, Dunn and Flanagan for the league games, which I think we would probably agree, while a day out at Wembley is great, I'd rather have the promotion.
Well, I mean, there's nuances that make the two situations different. John McLaughlin is only going to be omitted from Sunderland's side in terms of league games if he's injured. There is the possibility that Ozturk could return to the side because of the loss of form of, like a Flanagan or a Baldwin or a Dunn, etc. But it's important that Jack Ross feels confident that if either has to be introduced to the league side, as it were, that they've got at least some sort of match practice, and they're up to speed to a certain degree. So, there's benefit if Sunderland do get beat on Tuesday night in Bristol. I've got no doubt that the common theme coming from supporters will be, well, at least now we can focus exclusively on what's needed for the remaining league matches. There'll be the disappointment that they're missing out in Wembley, but it's promotion. Promotion is number one.
Absolutely,
without a shadow of a doubt. Yeah, it's number one.
A Checker Trade trophy is nice. It's a nice thing to have, and
apparently it's a very nice trophy.
I've seen it. Aesthetically, it's a very nice trophy. Yeah. So if nothing else, there's that. But ultimately, if you were going to offer me second place in League One or the Checker Trade trophy, I think it's quite profoundly obvious that I'm going for second place.
Absolutely.
That's what it is. So I've not really heard much from you so far on this, Finlay. What do you make in general about that question? Do you perhaps put sentiment above all else? Do you think Reuter and Ozturk should retain their spots if just because they've got us this far and deserve to see it out? Or would you play your stronger side?
Nevertheless, if we do play out a weakened side with Reuter and Ozturk, it'll still be a strong side. Like we were talking about the squad depth earlier on.
I agree.
We'll still have like the likes of McGeoch, maybe Gooch, Stott and Wyke, although he hasn't been scoring, he might be able to get a chance in the Checker Trade Trophy. But I know you've just been talking about that if we get to the final, I think it would be a day out for the fans, and if he thinks he can get to the squad depth that he has, I'll play the weakened side if he thinks he can get to Wembley with the squad. But if he really wants to get to Wembley that much and he doesn't feel like take the weakened side, I'll just play the stronger side. But if not, play the weakened side because of the games we've got coming up, like the Wickham game, Barnsley and Walsall. It's another tricky period for us, and then we'll go into the another tricky period in April when we play Accrington, that game in hand.
Yeah, when it eventually gets rearranged after about 5 different cancellations. But yeah, no, I think again there. I think what you've made there is a very good point about Reuter and Ozturk still playing, because even though it's a weakened team, I still think it's a strong team. I think for the standard we're at, I think Robin Reuter would probably get into most League One teams as a number one goalkeeper. I think I've seen quite a few dodgy keepers this season, and I think Alan Ozturk's the same with the centre back.
I've seen 3 last season.
Yeah, yeah. Oh dear.
One of which plays in the Premier League now somehow.
Yeah. Well, I think I tell you what. We once had Simon O'Rourke on here, and he said that the world needs third choice goalkeepers in the Premier League. Just look at people like Richard Wright, at like Man City, who was just sort of there, and just like
that's a nice job if you can get it.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. I mean,
it's like Steve Harper when he was here.
Steve Harper, yeah. Steve. I mean, and at Newcastle, really.
Newcastle.
Yeah. I was going to say Steve Harper was that everywhere.
I mean, he was a professional Steve was a professional footballer for I think about 21 years,
and he had about 100 appearances.
Yeah, and I mean it's incredible, but it's it's good luck to him.
Yeah, I mean, even if you're not playing, you've done pretty well in terms of financial decisions in your life to do what you've done. Crikey, yeah, it was really good. But anyway, let's move on to the no camp. Let's move on to the people who perhaps
the no camp. Is that where we're going to be playing in a few years?
Yeah.
See,
Johnny. If we're going to Europe, Johnny, I'll tell you what's going to happen. Right, bit of a tangent here. I've already foreseen this. We're going to lose in the final of an FA Cup sometime in the future after a very jammy run. We'll get into Europe, and then we'll have our first round, and we'll get knocked out by the third best team in Azerbaijan. That'll happen.
That sounds about right.
Yeah, that's how I would envision Sunderland's prospects in Europe in any sort of like real dimension.
Like all the away fans, we'll sell out the away end over there as well.
Oh yeah, totally. Oh yeah. Oh, we'll go straight to Baku. Yeah. We'll go straight to I don't know what they're called, Torpedo Baku. Let's say they call that. We'll go straight there, and that 700 allocation will be bouncing with Sunderland fans as we draw 1-1.
2 o'clock in the afternoon kickoff.
Absolutely,
because of the time difference.
Azerbaijan time. Oh yeah. That'll be wonderful, and they'll all be there. All be there as we score an own goal from one of their Azerbaijani fullbacks. But hey, it is what it is. But anyway, back to the no camp. Let's see the opinions from the people who shelve sentiment in favour of just playing a stronger team. So Jamie Davison says no. Now we're this close to Wembley, we need to make sure we get our strongest 11. Martin Walker says no. We should play the strongest team so we can at this stage. Sorry, I'll start that again, Martin. I do apologise. No, we should play the strongest team we can at this stage of the competition. It's harsh but common. We made changes in the early rounds of the 2014 League Cup and still picked the best team 5 years ago today. And there's also James I do hope I get the surname right. James O'Rafete, who says no. There's no room for sentiment, or rather, sorry, he sways towards no, saying that there's no room for sentiment in professional football. Look at Man City lineups throughout the League Cup in comparison to the one that played against Chelsea at Wembley last week. They have done nothing wrong, but sentiment can't be had at the risk of a trophy. So we'll go to you first, Johnny. What do you make of that?
As I say, I think we should stick by the strongest team that we. I would go by the strongest team that we've got at the moment, and I do think that maybe running the risk of dropping these players and they'll wonder why they're being dropped. I just think, like, well, in football you have to be ruthless sometimes, and a guarantee of, like, if we, I don't know, I was going to say if we get through, then you can put them back in for the final, but then it's like, well, that's kind of a weird decision. I feel maybe at this stage he's got so far with these guys, maybe he should have stick with what he's done, because it's worked so far, and just to keep everybody happy, keep the same team. Yeah.
I mean, I understand that, and I understand the points that have been made by supporters who are saying perhaps as progress has been made in an individual competition, you should pick a stronger team, or certainly pick a team that you believe can beat whoever the opponents are. There is a difference, though, if he has given assurances to individual players that they will feature, then there are potential ramifications if he's seen to or perceived to have broken that promise or that assurance to those players. And I know all people always say, particularly when teams are successful, that there's a wonderful unity in the camp. But, there's never, ever a universal unity in any camp. Footballers want to play, and a lot of the players who are not playing regularly will not be thinking that this is a wonderfully unified camp. They will be wanting to play and feeling that their attributes aren't being fairly assessed. So if Jack Ross says to, whatever players, you're going to feature in the League Cup, or you're going to feature in this cup, or he might have actually says to Ozturk and Reuter, you're going to feature in this game. And then as the next games came up, you're going to feature in this game. And then, of course, it might not be the case that in terms of Bristol Rovers away, or, of course, if they get to Wembley, that, and the other thing you have to consider is, as much as it shouldn't happen, if Sunderland get to Wembley and there are marketing opportunities to be had from winning the Checkatrade Trophy, it wouldn't be surprising to me if there's not influential arguments coming from the corridors of power at the Stadium of Light that he should pick his strongest team.
Oh yeah, that's a very good point.
Because
there's a big aspect of that, I think.
Absolutely, because as Sunderland became a Championship club and then, of course, became a League One club, there's a huge change in the percentages in terms of the income that is generated by the club. As a League One club, Sunderland's income is largely generated by what comes from the supporters. In the Premier League, because of what you receive from television rights, it's hugely influenced by what you get from Sky, BT, etc. So I've got no doubt that Stuart, Charlie, Juan and others involved at the highest echelons of the club.
Conor Bromley. A major player.
Yeah, he's a major...
You need to pick your strongest team, Jack.
I've got no doubt they'll be thinking, and even, we might not be talking about millions of pounds, but the club are trying to cut their financial cloth accordingly at this moment. And if they can maximise income and generate revenue from any stream, then they would be foolish not to look at what the potential financial benefits are from being the Checkatrade Trophy champions. I would much rather they do that, and I wouldn't be cynical about it, than them be considering the prospect of some open-top bus if Sunderland return from Wembley as champions.
Oh, that'd be great, that. I would love that, mate. George Honeyman holding the trophy on an open-top bus.
Oh, I please God, it does not happen. I'm completely against it.
Yes, I remember Roy Keane being like that when we won the championship. There was no celebrations at all. No. I was like, no, because that's where we should be.
Don't get me wrong, I would love to see the players celebrating. They're perfectly entitled to. I'd love to see the fans celebrating because they deserve it. But I wouldn't want this perception to be created that Sunderland Football Club see winning a Checkatrade trophy as a sign that would justify public celebration.
Yeah.
It simply it does not send out the wrong. It does not send out the right signals to people in the football and fraternity, both here, nationally, and globally.
It's not a big enough trophy ultimately to warrant that. I mean, I want to see some kind of extremely banterous celebration, but I feel like I'm too much of a sensationalist bugger to justify
I dare
that.
say even the League One trophy isn't really a big one. It's a promotion of the Premier League, perhaps, but I don't know about.
It's tricky. You have to draw a line somewhere, but I think the Checkatrade trophy is well beyond the line that distinguishes an open-top bus being justified from it not being justified. Yeah. I think it's a very tricky one, but. I want to see something. At the very least, I want to see Ali Mer's Turquoise and blue points around in Indy.
I tell you what you could do, Alex. I can't think offhand. But if you go over the teams that have won the Checkatrade trophy or its predecessors over the course of the last 20 to 30 years, then you'll find a significant number of clubs have won that particular trophy who, as a club, in terms of being compared to Sunderland, are nowhere near comparable. And yet, I bet they've not actually had an open-top bus through their respective town or city. So why would Sunderland consider the prospect?
Yeah, there'll have to be some background check there. Perhaps it'll come to the conclusion that, hey, look, if Yeovil Town didn't do it in 2012, then Sunderland don't do it now.
Yeovil Town might have done it, but then the following year, I don't know who won it the following year. They might not have done it. And I know things like this, they're much more conducive to a one-team city like Sunderland, because you can carry this out without any antipathy or vitriol coming from rival supporters. But nevertheless, for me, it would just send out the wrong signs.
Yeah, I think we're probably going to all be in agreement with that. I think it's too much. I think to go over,
getting a bit ahead of yourselves,
Yeah, I mean, obviously, this assumes that we're actually going to get to the final. As I said to my dad when he booked the hotel at Wembley, you have to see that we are Sunderland fans, and it's a very Sunderland fan thing to experience a 3-1 loss to a very terrible Bristol Rovers team that you've just played.
Sunderland at the end of the 2013-2014 season, I believe it was, or perhaps the season after, Sunderland brought out a DVD, I think it was entitled The Great Escape.
Yep,
which
I have that.
Effectively is celebrated avoiding relegation.
Yep.
That, for me, if you're a player who has the opportunity to come to Sunderland, you find out about it and then you go and research into the club, its ethos, its standards, its aspirations, and you find a club that releases DVDs that celebrate avoiding relegation, and you believe that you are a genuine top quality footballer. I mean, that for me was inanity, doing that. It really was. I know you might make more, and ironically enough, and I'm sure you'll appreciate this, when I spoke to Sunderland fans about this, they were candid enough to say, and you know what, Kieron, it's because they know mugs like me will go out and buy it. Which,
I am one of those mugs. I was like, you know what, I want that TV.
I'm not using that term, but I suppose you would say it was good business acumen from people like Ellis Short and his minions, because they were fully aware that this is something they could sell.
Oh yeah, well, I mean, it's yeah, as you say, when you step back, it's pretty small time, but the people are going to lap it up. But yeah, anyway, that's one of those things. So we'll just we'll just steer away now from the quick questions, and we'll go into our sort of interview-esque segments with them, Kieron and Finlay. They won't be too long as they normally are, but we still have some very pressing questions nonetheless that we want to get out. But we have one last yes or no question. But it's actually neither a yes or no. It's just from Graham, who runs the Extra podcast, and he says, always play Ozturk. In all caps, I love Ali Merzturk. So congratulations, Graham. You have won this week's Quick Questions segment. Your all-expenses-paid trip to the Cayman Islands will be with you via email shortly. Well done. That is correct. We must always play Ali Merzturk. I could never agree more. So let's move on to our questions now with Kieron and Finlay. So we'll start with you, Finlay. Now, you're a young budding reporter. You write regular columns not only for ROKER Report, but also in the Junior Black Cats column of the Matchday programme. Is that right?
Yeah.
Yep. Are there any other journalistic feats or any other things you also do to promote your portfolio?
Yes, sometimes I've done assemblies in my school, like promoting like career stuff and like how you like getting like interviews and like your certain subject that you want to get into and like how to get career opportunities. Like it was for all of the year groups, so like they get it because they're like new, so that they can get like the careers that we do in our school.
All right, good stuff. Oh, fantastic. So what inspired you to get into football writing, and what was the moment or the time in your life when you thought, yeah, I want to be a journalist and I want to get this ball rolling as soon as I can?
It was when I got tickets from my old head teacher in my junior school. I think I was like 7 or 8 at the time. I think we got beat that game.
Probably would have got beat. Yeah.
Probably.
If it's a few years ago and we're in the Premier League, then I'd put my money on it being a loss.
And just like as a thank you, I just wrote me head teacher a report, and ever since then I've just enjoyed doing it. Like I started off doing like the home games, then I got like into doing the away games, like all of it, and then like it's just progressed from there.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's really good to hear, Finlay. And to be honest, it's something I can relate to myself. When I was in secondary school myself, I presume it's secondary school you're in.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, when I was in secondary school, I used to write like articles in like my school newsletter, and that sort of like evolved into writing in sort of in like a football context, and then that became doing fan posts on websites and writing for sort of like smaller sort of pieces, and then from there it becomes ROKER Report and so on and so forth. So I think it's really good to hear that you're doing that. I mean, would you advise sort of like young lads your age to get into writing as soon as they can and just to get that ball rolling from the get-go?
Yeah, because like I've noticed like what I've done so far, like it's a good experience, like getting to know like the subject that you want to get into this early, because then you have like the chance to know like all the different aspects like I've done, and then like you can see which one you prefer, and then like you can go into greater depth with that, and then choose that like as your career pathway.
I think that's it. I think if you go into writing from the get-go, I think once you start writing, you can then find out pretty quickly what your style is and what maybe field that relates to. You know, there's political journalism, socio-economic, sport, which obviously, you know, you're obviously very much into. Yeah. So yeah, I think that's really sound advice, Finlay. So just one more question. What do you think your aspirations are at the future? Do you have a particular field of sports journalism that you would want to go into? I've
done like loads of different sports journalism, like the writing for like newspapers and art, and like fanzines like the ROKER Report, and like video journalism when I've done the interview with Jack Ross in October, and like the Junior Reporter Day last season, like different aspects, and like I've been on the radio a few times, like that's different aspects, but I think my favourite one is like writing.
Yeah, I mean, it's probably the one that you've contributed to the most often, haven't you, really? As you say, you've got those 2 regular columns on the go. So, I mean, that's going to be one heck of a portfolio. I mean, for a CV, I bet it's already looking pretty good.
Like I have my careers teacher who recently organised for us to go to Sky Studios, and it was a brilliant experience, like meeting all different people. Like I met Jeff Stelling as well. It was a great experience, like going all around the studios and how like it works there. Yeah.
So what was it like meeting Jeff Stelling? When he spoke, did he slow down and speed up his voice and then end with emphasis during normal conversation?
He was just like really impressed with my match reports, and like he just gave us a bit of advice on like stick with your career pathway, and to keep doing your best.
Yeah, and I echo that completely, Finlay. I think you're doing an excellent job so far, and honestly, more power to you, lad, because it's coming off for you really well.
Absolutely.
I mean, even today on the podcast, your contributions have all been excellent. So, I can speak for anyone, and when I say that, best of luck. Keep that ball rolling.
Thanks.
So we'll move up. You're very welcome, mate. So we'll move on to Kieron now. We'll move on to you. So we've got a few questions for you, and I believe Johnny has one. So I think I'll just start off, and then if you just want to jump in, Johnny,
Yep, of course.
when you feel the time's right. So you played as a midfielder, obviously, for Sunderland in both the old Division 1 and the old Division 2. What was your most outstanding memory during your time at Roker Park?
I think there would be two if time allows. I think at a very personal level, in terms of playing the game against West Ham, which I've been very fortunate, was so well received by the Sunderland fans, both who were in attendance and those who were aware of it afterwards. We won 4-3. I was only 18. It was my first goal for the club. I had 2 assists and generally played well throughout. It was a critical period of the season insofar as we went on a winning run then, which allowed us to eventually get promoted, albeit it was somewhat fortuitous because of Swindon's financial indiscretions. But there was another moment that I suppose illuminated just how loyal and devoted the Sunderland fans are. We were relegated away to Manchester City in 1991, and we were due to fly to Ibiza that night from Manchester Airport.
Right.
And about half an hour after the game had finished, the Manchester City stewards came into the away dressing room and told the players that the Sunderland supporters, who numbered about 15,000 that particular day, were unprepared to leave Main Road until such time as the Sunderland players went back out to see them. Now, in that moment, I wasn't sure what kind of reception we were going to get, bearing in mind that we had been relegated. And I was the first player ready, and I walked down the tunnel at Main Road, and as I looked to the left, all of the Manchester City supporters had vacated the stadium. And I looked to the right to see the thousands and thousands of Sunderland supporters gathered behind one goal and round the corner a little bit. And it felt to a man, woman and child that the ground just started chanting Kieron, and this wonderful sign of affection at a time when they must been feeling particularly low.
Yeah.
Is something that will always stay with me. And it's very difficult to say that one of the greatest memories you have as a Sunderland footballer is in the immediate aftermath of being relegated. But at a wholly personal level, that was a wonderfully joyous moment for me. But certainly in terms of performances then, the West Ham game, because it was, I was so young, I was only, I was 18. That would be a very fond memory.
Yeah. I mean, I can speak for me. My dad reckons you're one of his favourite players when he was younger. So, I mean, it's...
When he was younger, and you're making me feel older. There you go. There you go.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, do you want to jump in, Johnny?
Yeah, so I was going to ask about, you had to retire at the age of 22, is that right?
21.
21. Okay, and so was it a gradual thing? Did you expect that this would happen, or is it...
No, it's something that began to surface in the summer of 1992, so not long after we'd been to Wembley and the FA Cup final, we returned to pre-season training, and I started to notice that I was experiencing a lot of pain and discomfort in my lower right leg. And over the period of the next 4, 5, 6 months, it began to become much more consistent, much more severe in terms of how painful it was. And despite the fact that I'd made numerous complaints about it to Steve Smelt, the sports therapist at the club, there wasn't any sign that it was going to be advanced to get a more proficient or professional opinion. And what was discovered subsequently was that if it had been established around about the first time I was, expressing such concerns, then it may have been that a much more straightforward procedure could have been used to try to rectify the problem. So it wasn't a typical footballing injury. it was something that I had been born with, which had deteriorated over time and then started to become much more notable by the time I was about 19. And of course, several procedures took place, and unfortunately, they were unable to basically remove the blockages in the arteries, which of course was the source of the problem. And it effectively meant that I was no longer able to play football. But I'm, for some years after, there was definitely a sense of embitterment. But owing to the fact that I still live in this area, owing to the fact that I've developed such an affection and affinity for Sunderland, its people, and of course the supporters, I'm much more grateful now for the 5 years that I did get, rather than bemoan the 10 or 12 years that I was unable to realise. So I'm always conscious that there's people around me almost at any given moment that would give their right arm to put on that red and white striped shirt once. And I was able to not only do it on a number of occasions, but I was also able to do it with people chanting my name on a very regular basis. So I would never consider myself unfortunate. When I was 6 years old till being 16, I had a dream of being a professional footballer, and I was able to do it. And there are thousands, tens of thousands, millions around the world who would love the opportunity, but for whatever reason don't get it. So that, I would like to think, answers the question.
That's very well said, I think. Very well said. So just one more question, Kieron. If you had to make up a five-a-side team now of Sunderland players that you've either played with or seen.
Does it have to be Sunderland players?
Yes.
Is there no technicalities or loopholes that I can exploit?
That depends on your loophole.
Right. Well, I was going to include a player who I played alongside for Ireland, but who managed Sunderland.
I'll let you have it.
Okay, thank you. Well, I would probably have to pick Tony Norman, because although he might not be a household name for many some Sunderland fans perhaps, and certainly footballing fans in a broader context, he was exceptional in the time that I was at the club. He was a Welsh internationalist, for those that don't know. He would have played a lot more times for the Welsh national side if it wasn't for the fact that he was understudy to the great Everton and Wales goalkeeper Neville Southall.
Yeah.
So Tony Norman would be in goals. If I was allowed to play a 2-1-1 formation,
I think that's pretty standard in fives. That's what my team used to play. Mind you, my team won 3 games.
I know it's not very radical. I'm sure Pep would do it differently. But if it was 2-1-1, then I would probably have John Kay playing on the right-hand side, simply because, as much as many people know about his wonderful and wacky character, he was actually a very good defender. I did not like playing against him in training. He was very good at intimidating me. He didn't make any secret of the fact that he felt one good way to stop me was to do it psychologically as much as physically, which he did on any number of occasions. So it would be John Kay, and alongside him, I would probably go for Bolly. Bolly, like John Kay, wasn't overly kind or respectful of the fact that I was one of their teammates in training. They both were very physical. They, of course, would try to excuse it as a tough love approach, which was designed to improve your mental strength as you were developing as a footballer. And then, if I'm allowed to include myself, or the standard practice is to include yourself, then it would be me up front,
right,
with a license to roam, as it were, with Roy Keane.
Yeah.
Now, somebody like myself, who wasn't a great tackler by any stretch of the imagination, who wasn't physical towards opponents, would feel great comfort in having 3 teammates alongside you of John Kay, Kevin Ball and Roy Keane. Apart from anything, if you're asking me to pick a team of players that I played alongside, I would actually just be frightened to leave Roy Keane out.
Yeah.
Just on the off chance that he gets to hear this. He takes great offence at the fact that he's been omitted. But, so yeah, There we go.
That's a hard team. Like that is a
They're the hard ones. You know, I would just like the fact that they would hopefully get me the ball. And
oh yeah,
you know,
I mean that team rocks up the goal. Sunderland, crikey.
yeah.
Everyone vacate.
Kevin Ball used to say to me, work this out if you can, because 25 years after it happened, I still can't. He would say to me during training, quite often after he'd knocked me 6 foot in the air, Kieron, I don't mean to hurt you, but I mean to whack you.
Wow.
Yeah, you know, as if I would take great consolation from lying on the ground with blood pouring out me. Well, thanks for that, Kevin. That's very noble of you.
Yeah, it is. That makes it all right, obviously.
But he, you know, that was the way he was. You know, the Kevin Ball that so many fans seen on a regular basis at Roker Park at the Stadium of Light or playing away from home was no different to what you got in training.
No.
That was just his DNA. I know people would say, oh, I love Bally because he would run through a brick wall for Sunderland. Well, the actual truth is that he would run through a brick wall for any team that he played. There's no doubt, however, he does have a special affection for this club.
Oh, I must do.
The fact that he still lives in the area, he works for the club. I mean, he is, to all intents and purposes, Mr. Sunderland.
Yeah, absolutely. So thank you very much, Kieron and Finlay, for those little impromptu interviews there. I think those are both excellent.
Okay, can I just say thank you very much for asking me to come on?
Oh, you're very welcome. You're very welcome. It's been an absolute pleasure. Just before we sign off, we're going to have one more little thing. All we're going to do is just give our score predictions for the Bristol Rovers game and then the subsequent Barnsley game. So we'll start with you, Johnny. What do you reckon? Just fire some numbers at us.
Okay, so since I am going, I don't want to go all the way down there and be disappointed. So I'm going to go for another 2-0 Sunderland win.
At Rovers?
Yes. Barnsley...
Is there not a game? There's a game between.
There's a game against Wickham at the weekend.
Oh, right. Nah, forget Wickham.
Forget Wickham.
Yeah.
So do we still have the Barnsley one, or?
Yeah, okay. Go for the ball. Yeah, those are our crunch games in the near future.
I'll go 1-0 Sunderland.
In the Barnsley game, all right. 3 goals scored, none conceded.
Yeah.
Tremendous.
We'll see.
What do you reckon, Kieron?
I can see Sunderland getting to Wembley, but I believe that it might go beyond the 90-minute mark. Now, I don't know, are we at this stage of the competition where extra time's involved, or is it straight to penalties as it has been?
I think in the checker trade you go straight to penalties, don't you?
At every round?
Right, I think that.
So, yes. Right, I believe so.
Well, I'm going to go then for Sunderland on penalties.
Fantastic.
Tuesday.
Great.
As for the game at Oakwell, I wouldn't be as confident.
No.
I think a draw, given that Sunderland have got the advantage now over Barnsley if all games were played and all of that, a draw wouldn't be a bad result. So, a draw.
Fair enough. What about you, Finlay?
For the Bristol Rovers game, I think we might just nick it 1-0 in 90 minutes.
I'll take that.
And the Barnsley game, I would be happy with the draw with their home record and our away form at the moment. I would just take a 1-1 draw.
Yeah. I think that's pretty on the dot. I think for me against Bristol Rovers, you know what I think what will happen is they'll go 1-0 up, and then we'll catastrophise the entire situation, and then we'll win 3-1 in the second half because ultimately they're quite a poor team every time I've seen them. So I think we'll beat them 3-1, and then when we play Barnsley, you know, I'm just casually omitting the Wickham game from our fixture like it's not there. You know, crikey, what. Really bad oversight from me, but hey ho, with Barnsley, I think, as you've said, Finn, and as you've said, Kieron, I think I would take a draw, and I think the draw is what we'll get. I think it'll be 2-2, in my opinion. Okay. I'm going to go for it. I'm going to go for a 2-2 draw. I think we're going to get the point, and then we've still got the game in hand over them. So I think it'll still be optimistic, while not the perfect result, but I think it's the most realistic one. So for me, that's a 3-1 win over Rovers and a 2-2 win over Barnsley. So
2-2
I think
draw.
Sorry?
It's a 2-2 win. You said 2-2 win over Barnsley.
Hey, well, I've said it now, so that's what it is. It's a 2-2 win. To be fair though, if we draw 2-2 and then win the game in hand, it's a win of sorts. Yeah. It's a win in the long game. Well, okay, so
well recovered, Alex.
Yeah. Well, it was well recovered, except that it wasn't really. But I tried my best. Yeah. So I think we'll round it off there. So thank you very much, Finlay, for joining us.
You're welcome.
Yep, and you're welcome back anytime, lad. That was excellent. Thank you very much, Kieron. The same sentiments apply.
Thank you.
You're very welcome. And Johnny, you're still here.
That's unfortunately. Thanks, Alex, for having me on.
Yeah. I mean, if you don't want to come back, that's okay. You know?
Yeah. Well, Josh will be happy to come back.
Yeah, I'm of course only joking.
Some exchange betting companies run short-lived promotions, like month-long offers of low commission. At BetDAG, we wanted to change the way we did things, so we set our commission at 2% permanently. That's 2% on football, horse racing, golf, almost any sport. 2%. That's just one way that BetDAG is changing for the better. For the better, like you. BetDAG, the 2% commission exchange.
Over 18s only, please gamble responsibly.